Hey everybody, welcome to the videos for my core plays for week 7 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. This is where I go my 3 favorite cash and tournament plays on the entire slate. If you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Since it's the end of the month, if you do want to sign up, you can get this last week for free as long as you sign up on November 1st, because I don't want you guys to get double charged for signing up so late in the month. So it's a free week if you want to check out the content. Which, if you like the free content over at YouTube, I'm sure you'll like this as well. Spreadsheets, ownership projections, optimizers, projections, data sheets, Discord community for all sports that are on currently, including the NBA, NASCAR, and the NFL. So go and check it out. Link is down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified. Just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signing over on PrizePicks, you get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage? When you use code CPENN and tell them I sent you. I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And starting us off with cash game core play number 1, we have the one and only, the guy I'm projecting to be the highest owned player on the entire slate. No, not just the highest projected running back, the highest projected player. Darrell Henderson, $6,600, RB1 for the LA Rams, and I just don't see how he doesn't smash here. Absolute smash spot versus Detroit. He checks each and every single box for me. He's a large home favorite. He plays on a good offense that can score a lot of points. Super high implied team total this week, 33 points, 15.5 point favorites at home. Great matchup versus Detroit, gets the majority of the touches in this backfield, and he's involved in the passing game. As you guys saw, he had like a 25-yard receiving touchdown last week. So what's not to like about Henderson? Really the only bad thing I could say about him is in tournaments it's going to be super chalky, and there's a couple other running backs around him like Leonard Fournette, DeAndre Swift, Chuba Hubbard if you want to get some pivots, but in cash games, just lock and load Henderson because it's probably going to work out. Detroit's been awful versus the run this year. Joe Mixon last week absolutely destroyed them, and I think we'll probably see more of the same here out of Henderson. They're allowing the second most points per game to the position, 33.5 points, 26 DVA versus the run, well over 100 rushing yards per game, rushing touchdown, and receiving touchdown allowed per game, specifically two running backs. So Henderson is very easy to fit in our lineups, and he hasn't really had a bad game yet this year. Like his worst games, I want to say like 14, 15 points. He did miss 1 week, but he's been pretty good this year, sporting around a 10% target share, getting around 16 carries per game. We should see around 20-plus touches for Henderson if all goes well. Now, if they're blowing out the Lions at the end of the game, we might see more Michelle than we want, but if that's the case, Henderson probably already did enough damage to make him worth 6.6K salary. And moving on to cash game core play number 2, and I want to tell you right now, the wide receiver position is not easy this week. And I don't mean that because there's just a lot of bad options and bad matchups. It's just that there's too many good options and good matchups. Like, it's really hard to pick between all these wide receivers this weekend. Like, I would love to sit here and tell you, play Devontae Adams, play Tyreek Hill, play Cooper Kupp, but I think we all know that. But it's really hard to fit them into our lineups. Like, yes, I'm going to try my very best to fit them in for cash games, but if we can't, there's some pretty good mid-range options this weekend. One of those being Calvin Ridley at $6,600, so I feel like is way too cheap. I think at this point in the season, heading into the year, we probably thought Calvin Ridley is going to be like a 8 to 9K wide receiver, so $6,600 screams some pretty good value. I know he hasn't played in a while because he was injured for the London game, and then he had the bye week, but should be fully good to go here, and I think this is way too cheap. In the games he's played this year, 10.5 targets per game, close to 7 catches, goes to a 27% target share, about a 50% market share of the team's air yards, and he gets a great matchup here versus Miami, who is currently allowing the third most points per game to the wide receiver position, 26 versus the pass, and over 200 receiving yards allowed per game specifically to wide receivers and over a receiving touchdown. So Calvin Ridley's in a great spot here. I could see this game being somewhat high scoring. It's got a 47.5 point over-under, which I think seems healthy for some of these cheaper options in this game, like Jalen Waddle, Tua, Matt Ryan. It could be like a cheap, sneaky shootout, really. But Ridley is projecting very well point per dollar-wise, and I am projecting him to be one of the highest on wide receivers on the entire slate. So I think in cash games at this price point, he just fit nicely into your lineup if you're kind of going towards a more balanced approach. And moving on to our third and final cash game core play of the week, it's Chris Godwin here at $5,900. And like I was saying, it's actually not terrible to go with the more of a mid-range approach this weekend, the wide receiver position. Like, I know it's really good up top. I already talked about those guys, but there's some really good mid-range gems here who I feel like are just way underpriced for the volume that they should see, especially with the big news that Antonio Brown is out. That's kind of the reason I like Chris Godwin here. First off, he's really cheap at $5,900, but when you take a guy like Antonio Brown off the field, a guy that's averaging 8.5 targets per game and a 21% target share, that opens up a lot of room for more volume for guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, maybe a couple guys out in the backfield, Leonard Fournette, maybe the tight ends get more involved. There's no Rob Gronkowski. So Chris Godwin, the ball's going to go somewhere, and Godwin is kind of the safety valve for Tom Brady. And I would be kind of surprised if he doesn't see close to double-digit targets, if not hit that mark, and you get closer to 15 depending on how the game goes. But definitely like Chris Godwin a lot here. The Bears, I wouldn't say it's the best matchup out there, but they're kind of lower half in terms of fantasy points allowed per game to the position, despite being 6 DVA versus the pass. But Chris Godwin's really hard to pass up here. Plays the majority of his snaps out of the slot. And this is with Antonio Brown playing. He's averaging around 7 targets per game and a 17.5% target share. Take him out of the equation. Defenses usually try to shut down Mike Evans with his big playability, so Chris Godwin should get peppered with targets here. And they have a team total close to 30, so points are going to be scored. I'd be kind of surprised if Chris Godwin does not have a pretty big game here. I'm projecting him for around 18 fantasy points, which if you factor that in point per dollar wise at $5,900, it's one of the best at the position of this slate. Now, I do want to mention over on Prize Picks, you guys know I play over there, and I recommend you guys too, because you can find some pretty good value over there. For those of you playing over on Prize Picks this weekend alongside with me, Chris Godwin's actually at a pretty good value over there. I'm hoping his line is still set there by the time this video posts, but I got him at 60.5 receiving yards. I took the over on that. If you look at the DraftKings Sportsbook, they have him at 72.5, and the juice is on the over there. So I think you're getting some massive value. I'm not sure they've really reflected their numbers yet with the news that Antonio Brown is out, but even if it doesn't hit, I still feel really good about getting that value at 60.5 receiving yards, especially with AB being out, because you're getting some massive value compared to other books. And moving on to our first GPP core play of the week, I feel like we have him here each and every single video, but it's DeAndre Swift once again at $6,000, RB1 for the Detroit Lions, and it's mainly just because of his role in the passing game. And I love Ram stacks this week, so who are we going to run it back with? Are we going to use Amon-Ra St. Brown? I don't really want to. He's got a pretty tough matchup versus that secondary. I don't really want to use TJ Hawkinson. So let's just use DeAndre Swift because he's involved in the passing game a lot. I realize people don't like to use running backs that are 15.5-point dogs on the road, but with his involvement in the passing game, we're pretty much getting like a wide receiver 2 and an RB2 mixed together here with DeAndre Swift. So he actually does make sense as a run back option. And he's getting literally 7 targets per game, close to 6 catches per game, close to 50 receiving yards on an 18.5% target share and a 27% weight opportunity share. And while the Rams have been tough versus the run, they're still 16th in fantasy points allowed per game to the position and allowing nearly 6 catches and 50 receiving yards per game. But one of the big reasons I even put DeAndre Swift on here is because I want to talk about its prize pick prop, which just seems insanely too low to me. Because most books, like DraftKings, has it set at like 46 to 47 receiving yards as his over-under. You can get him at 35.5 on Prize Picks. That was an easy over for me. Even if it doesn't hit, I feel amazing about the value we got there because he's hit over that mark in 5 of 6 games so far this year. Just looking at his game log, 43, 53, 33. So he just missed it by a couple yards that one game, but then 60, 41, 65. So I feel very good about that over there. He just gets so many targets. And with them being such huge dogs on the road, I mean, they're going to be dumping it off a lot to DeAndre Swift. So he's going to pile up points on a PPR slate like DraftKings. And he should have a pretty big game through the air, and hopefully he falls into the end zone, which he has done a couple times this year. So $6,000, like I said, a lot of good mid-range running backs this week. I think Chuba Hubbard, Leonard Fournette will have high ownership, as will Darrell Williams. So he kind of falls right in between a few chalkier plays, but should keep his ownership decently low. Then moving on to GPP core play number 2, one of my favorite wide receivers in all of football. We have DJ Moore, wide receiver 1 of the Carolina Panthers at $7,100, and everybody's talking about the big 3 this week at wide receiver: Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. We all know they're fantastic plays, but do not forget about DJ Moore. And people are going to flock to those guys up top. You can't afford DJ Moore alongside them, assuming you're spending up for some other decent players at the other positions. So DJ Moore should get a bit overlooked, plus his running back on that team, Chuba Hubbard, will have quite heavy ownership this weekend, one of the highest running backs in the entire slate, at least that's what I'm projecting. But DJ Moore gets a fantastic matchup versus the Giants. Cooper Kupp last week absolutely destroyed this defense. I think DJ Moore can do more of the same. He's coming off a game where he had 13 targets last weekend versus Minnesota. And on the year, Moore has been amazing. About 10.5 targets per game, close to 30% target share, about a 40% market share of the team's air yards. And the Giants currently this season are 22nd DB versus the pass and allowing the 4th most points per game to the wide receiver position. So do not forget about DJ Moore, as he's going to get lost in the shuffle with the big 3 at wide receiver this weekend. An expensive Derrick Henry and Chuba Hubbard will be quite owned, so people are just going to naturally skip over DJ Moore. But I think he's an excellent target at really low ownership this weekend. And moving on to our third and final GPP core play of the week, we have the wide receiver 1 for the Tennessee Titans, AJ Brown at $6,300. Julio Jones is currently questionable to play, although it sounds like he's going to be good to go, but you really can't trust the gimpy Julio Jones. So AJ Brown, I expect him to lead the team in targets here, and with everyone playing Derrick Henry this week, everyone playing the Chiefs, hopefully AJ Brown gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. I'm still projecting him for some decently high ownership. I think you could actually play AJ Brown in cash games, but I'm not sure I'm going to go that route personally because you can get Chris Godwin for a little bit cheaper. There's a couple of other guys like Sterling Shepard, if he plays, feel a little bit safer than AJ Brown, but there's a lot of upside in this game. It's going to be a very high-scoring affair. By far the highest total in the slate, sitting at 57 points, 5-point spread. Titans currently have a 26-point implied team total, which is not that bad. I think it sets up pretty well for the passing attack for the Titans. Now, I will say, I'm expecting Derrick Henry to have a big game, but he's going to carry heavy ownership, and people aren't going to want to play AJ Brown and Derrick Henry together. At least I don't think they're going to want to. So I think AJ Brown at this price point, I know he's been pretty disappointing this year, but he did have his best game of the season last week versus Buffalo, who's been very stingy versus wide receivers this year. Had 9 targets, 7 catches, got over 90 yards, good for around 16, 17 fantasy points, which sadly enough, that was his best game of the season, but I definitely think he could surpass that in this one. KC is currently 31st DVA versus the pass, despite being kind of stingy versus wide receivers, but AJ Brown should have no problem whatsoever having a good game. I think he gets his first 100-yard game of the year, hopefully falls into the end zone, which if he does that, we're talking around 20-some DraftKings points, which I'm not projecting him for 20-some points, but I think it's definitely in the ceiling here for AJ Brown, which should be a very high-scoring game. He's got around 40% market share of the team's air yards this season. And honestly, if Julio Jones does play, it might even work in his favor, especially if he's just out there kind of being a bit of a decoy. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon, link is down below in the description for that. Spreadsheets, optimizers for all sports, ownership projections. Optimizer's been great so far for me this year. I've taken down multiple showdown tournaments with it. I'm sure you guys would enjoy all the extra content over there, in addition to what you see for the free stuff on YouTube every single week or day, depending on how often you guys hang around here. And like I said earlier, if you do want to sign up, since we're close to the end of the month, I can refund this last week for you for free as long as you stay signed up on November 1st, so you get 5 weeks instead of 4 for the following month. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And if you're new signing up there, all you gotta do is use code CPEN to get a free money bonus. This deposit match up to $100, and use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I wish you guys the best of luck on Sunday for week 7.